Shalom lekulam, and welcome to our weekly study on the portion of the Torah, weekly Parsha. The Parsha for this week is Devarim. Devarim starts in the book of with the same name, Devarim, which is the book of Deuteronomy. It starts in chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 3, verse 22. And in this parsha, basically what we're going to have is Moshe speaking to the congregation of Israel, and what he does is a repetition of the Torah that he that he received, and what he does is review events that occurred during the 40 years in the desert, and also he talks about certain things that happen, the good things, the bad things, the importance of keeping the Torah, observing the commandments once the people of Israel, the congregation of Israel, reach the land of Israel, or the land of Canaan, which later becomes Israel. And he also recalls in this portion the appointment of the judges. And also he talks about the spies. What, if you guys remember in previous parsha, we talked about the 10 spies, and also how eventually this generation after the spies needed to die in the desert. And he even said, that even against me, he said, was God angry for your sake, saying, you too shall not go in there. If you remember, Moshe got kind of angry, and he was supposed to talk to a rock and get water for the congregation of Israel from that rock. Yet instead of talking to the rock, he hit the rock twice with his staff. And for that reason, his punishment, or we would say, the result of his action, was that he wasn't gonna enjoy seeing the children of Israel inside the land, that they will reach the land after his death. And he also recounts the refusal of some nations like Moab and Ammon to allow the Israelites to pass through their countries, in order to reach Israel. And also he recounts the wars against the Amorite kings, and he recounts also the decision of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and some part of Manasseh to stay on the other side of the Jordan. And there's a message that he has also in this portion, and the message is for Joshua ben Nun, his successor Joshua received a message from Moshe, and it was that fear them not, for the Lord your God, he shall fight for you. That he wasn't supposed to fear these forces of Tumah, which when we read the Torah, it's talking about nations that were in the land of Canaan that needed to be there was supposed to be a war against them in order to take the land. So let's start with the Kabbalistic insights in the Parsha, according to Rabbi Yaakov Abu Haseira. And one of the things that we need to understand is that like every Parsha, every Parsha starts with a name, and the name is referred to the words that are used in the beginning of that Parsha. In this case, the Parsha start, these are the words that Moshe spoke to all Israel in the other side of the Jordan, regarding the wilderness, regarding Arava. So it reads, Ele hadevarim asher diber Moshe el kol Israel be'ever Yarden be'midbar ba'arava. And the words that we need to pay attention right now is going to be the word Bemidbar, which is wilderness, and also the word Arava. We're going to study those two words, in here. So, regarding the wilderness, the word Bemidbar, wilderness, is similar to the word Dibur. In fact, if you look at the word Bemidbar, if you change the vowels, you can say that the word can say also Medaber. If you take the bet out, Medaber to talk, right? So what is important here is to understand that the relationship of this word Bemidbar with the word Dibur, which is speech, is related to the previous Parsha. Is about guarding the tongue, guarding the way we speak, guarding the way we approach things in life, the way we talk about other people, the way we talk even about the Creator. So, as we have said in previous Parsha, every time that the children of Israel will say something out of place, something that was Lashon Hara, there will be some kind of punishment, some kind of plague, some kind of skin disease and all that. So it is important that this type of Lashon Hara or bad use of our mouth or for speech, is guarded all the time. And that's the first thing that Moshe is doing by this. In a code, he's basically saying, this is what's gonna get you in trouble. The speech is important. Remember, with speech, with the verb, what's the word created? The same thing. Man has the same power with speech. He can create things. He can create angels. He can create demons. He can create a lot of troubles for himself or a lot of blessings for himself. That's why it is important to guard the speech. And that's also the secret of why when we say the Shema, we're supposed to make a sound, to have that speech, sound somehow, because it's powerful, right? The Arava, the word Arava, implies, sweet. The word Arava can be say, like Ve'arva, which means, like sweet. But also when the letters are arranged, putting the resh with the ayin and the apart from the beit and the hey, it also means evil is in it. Evil is within it. So basically saying that, and when it says, Bemidbar Arava, Bemidbar Arava, it's telling you, that the guard of speech, the call to guard of speech, and also with the word Arava is saying, because evil is in it. We can use speech in order to sweeten things, basically to use the forces of Chesed, the forces of Hasidim, or we can use speech in order to bring justice, and sometimes that justice is not really justice, it's more hate speech than anything else. So that's why it is important for Moshe to put that in front of the children of Israel before he starts talking about the rest of the things that happen. So let's read this whole the whole verse in here, chapter 1, verse 1. These are the words that Moshe spoke to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan, regarding the wilderness, regarding Arava, opposite the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and between Tophel and Lavan and Hatzerot and Disahav. So why these names are mentioned? The name here that are mentioned have some deeper meaning that we're gonna touch base on those meanings and everything. But first we need to understand why he mentioned these names. You have to understand that in the Kabbalistic, we say, lack for a better word here, the cosmology or system of creation, there's a breaking of the vessels. And in that breaking of the vessels, there is a concept known by Kabbalists called the 8 kings, the 8 kings that die. You're going to find that in the Zohar. You're going to find that also explained by the Ari in the Etz Chaim, the Tree of Life. And what happened when these vessels broke, because it's about the breaking of the vessels, the Shevirat HaKelim, is that a lot of these sparks fell down to lower realms, and these realms were full of darkness. And this cliphotic system, the system of darkness, feeds from the light of these sparks that fell lower to the lower realms, right? So what Moshe is trying to tell the children of Israel is that your mission is about rectifying these 8 kings that die, right? So this is basically what Rabbi Yaakov Hussein is saying. There are 7 kings who die, because even though we say 8 kings that die, there was one that when we read the Torah, it says that he didn't die. In fact, even his wife is mentioned. So when his wife is mentioned with name and everything, it tells that this king was rectified. Basically, he did not die, even though it's mentioned in Kabbalah, that he died. And when you study the book of Bereshit, you understand that the 7 days of creation have to do with these kings as well, with the breaking of the vessel and the correction, the word absolute, correcting these vessels, right? There are 7 kings who die, although in the ingredients of the incense there are 11 ingredients. So he's comparing, the ingredient of the incense, as basically forces to rectify this. And it says that the Arizal answers the question as follows. There are 7 kings, as well as 4 back. So that's you have basically 7 plus 4 backs portion of the Sefirot Abba, Ima, and Yesu, which is Israel Saba and Tebuna. I know I'm talking about some concepts a little bit advanced, but basically these are 4 Partsufim, Abba, Ima, and then Israel Saba and Tebuna, which is Yesud, is basically like the lower parts, of it. And basically it says that Yetzud, which is the other 2, Israel Saba and Teuna, are basically like the lower halves of Abba and Ima. And Ima and Teuna are 2 halves of Bina in Atzilut. And Abba and Israel Saba are 2 halves of Sephirah Chokmah in the world of Atzilut. The 7 kings are described as having died, and they descended from the word Atzilut to the word of Bria, and descending from one world to another is death, just as when a person dies and goes from this world to another world. Okay, so that's why they're considered dead. They fell. In later, after the word absolute, the word of creation is created, you're gonna see in Bereshit, in Genesis, that the 7 days of creation are made, and man, Adam, was supposed to eat from the tree of life on the 7th day, but he didn't wait for the 7th day to eat from the tree of life. He ate from the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, before Shabbat. He needed to eat first from the tree of life, and then he was going to be able to eat from the tree of good and evil. Therefore, it is said that he knew death, that he now was immortal, meaning that he descended from a very high level of spirituality to a lower level of spirituality, and he broke into pieces, and those pieces are us. So it's the same repetition of what happened with the breaking of the vessels in the Shevirat HaKelim before the world of Atzilut was created. So now let's let's break this, verse by verse and word by word, so we know what forces are working here. Okay, because basically Moshe is telling, this is your mission, Israel. This is what you need to do. You need to rectify these things, and that's the reason of your existence. Okay, so he spoke about speech, about the proper speech, about basically also, that it can be good or it can be evil, and with speech you can create all that. But speech also has, a meaning, and we're gonna talk about that later, because it has to do with seramping. Okay, so what Moshe did when he spoke, these are the words that Moshe spoke to all Israel, right? It's basically that Moshe was warning them about the four back portions of the spiritual words that descended, and regarding the seven kings who died. And it says on the other side of the Jordan, that part basically means that the four parts of four back portions, and the Sephironon and Israel Sabanteuna, which is Yesud, that never died, but rather they never died, but they descended from the position that they were. The hint is as follows: when the word be'ever appears, which means on the other side, adding one for the word itself has a numerical value of 275, which is the same as be'arva. Be'arva means with four, referring to the four back portions of Yesu. The word Hayarden, Jordan, is related to the word Yedidah, descent. In other words, it is hinting to the four back portions that descended rather than die. And in the Talmud, in Bechorot 55a, says that this river called Jordan, the Jordan, it's called Jordan because it descends. It does a yeret it descends from the territory of Dan, so it descends down. So that's why it's called Jordan. So we can say that it's called the descent, the river of descent. And on the side of the Jordan, regarding the wilderness, regarding Arava, the final letter of these words, Be'aver, Hayarden, Bemidbar, Be'arava. The final letters of these words are Resh, Gimel, Resh, and Hey. And actually it's not Gimel, it's Resh, Nun, Resh, Hey, which together, when we add them, is from the numerical value of 455, which is the same numerical value as the word Mitah, or death. Okay, so these kings represent the seven lower Sephirot in the word of Hasilut, and the verse now alludes to them by saying Bemidbar, the wilderness, which this word itself is 246 in Gematria, and is the same as Mir, which is one of the ingredients in the incense and correspond to the Sephirah Chesed. The Arava, which is regarding the Arava, this word has a numerical value of 279, and it equals to acacia. Acacia, it's an ingredient in the incense and corresponds to the Sephirot Geburah. Then we have the word Mosuf, and Mosuf is its opposite to the reeds, opposite to the Sea of Reeds. It's allude to the Sephirah Tiferet, okay, which is the middle line of the Sephirot. And Mosuf can also mean opposite the end, because Suf, it means also end, indicating that the Sephirah Tiferet, that is opposite to Sephirot Yesod and Malchut, right, which remain beneath it and at the end of the line. Furthermore, Tiferet is referred to as Pericha Hatiyahon, the middle bolt, and that's from the Zohar, volume 2, page 51b. The words bein paran, between paran, the word paran itself is related to the word puru. Puru, fruitful, means fruitful, alludes to the Sephirah Netzach, that includes anything that is good, and fruitful. The word vein tofel, and between tofel, the word tofel alludes to Sephirah Hod, which the forces of impurity or tuma are attached. And the word Hod may be rearranged as dava, which means impurity. And the verse say, "He made me desolate, impure all day." That's in Echa, first chapter, verse 13. This is the sephirah to which the forces of impurity are attached. The word tofel means foolishness, referring to the force of tuma, impurity. Now, velavan, lavan, this refers to the sephirah yesod, as the word lavan has a numerical value of 82, the same as be yesod, in yesod. Be hatzerot and haserot, this implies to courtyard, because basically the word means almost like courtyard, and it alludes to the sephirah malchut. And on Psalms 116 verse 19, basically what it says, the courtyards of Hashem, it means basically the places of worship of the Creator, where Malchut actually is manifested. In this case, on our case, in modern days, it's the esnoga, or synagogue for the Ashkenazi. And that's where you're gonna, find basically the Malchut. Then the next word, Vedei Sahav. Vedei Sahav, this refers to the 8th king, Hadar. And this is the one that I said, even though it says 8 king that died, in reality there were 7. The 8th one didn't die. He's mentioned in Parsha Devarim after the 7 other kings who died, but the Torah does not say that he died. It just says, that it mentions his name and then mentions his wife's name. His wife's name is Mehitabel bat Matrei bat Mesahaf. That is in Genesis chapter 36, verse 39. The importance here is that she was the daughter of Mesahaf, and as a result, this king achieved the rectification. Okay. So what Moshe is doing by mentioning these names of these places is cautioning the Bnei Israel about the work that they need to do with these 7 kings that die, and how they need to rectify them. Okay. So let's jump ahead a little bit, and let's go to chapter 1, verse 15. "And I took the heads of your tribe, distinguished men who were wise and well known, and I appointed them as heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50, and leaders of tens, and officers for your tribe." So the appointing of judges was because Moshe was basically taking care of all the business of judging between people and all that. Then came somebody that is very important in our study, especially in a parsha that has even his name, and his name is Yetro. And Yetro tells Moshe, you cannot do this by yourself. You gotta, appoint judges for these people. And the reason is that Moshe, he's actually from the side or from the energies, or we say, from the level of Hevel, from the level of Adam's son called Abel. And Jethro was from the level of Cain. So Jethro was basically telling him, you cannot correct both sides. You're gonna have to dedicate yourself to correct the side that you belong, which is Hevel, and the other side, which is Cain, which Jethro understood. You need to appoint judges. Judges is Din, is Geburah. Moshe, Hevel, was from the side of Chesed, right? And so this is the reason he appoints these judges. But why he said appoint them as heads over you, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and leaders of 10. So the reason for that is the following. The thing that we need to understand, that the word for thousands, which is Eleph, that's why he says Sarei Elafim, but the word Eleph, thousand, also stands from the letter Aleph. So it's the letter Aleph. Those thousand alludes to Adam. So thousands is Adam, okay? Which has the value of 45, and if you know the value of 45, it's the value of the name of God that is expanded and is for the Parsuf Ma, which is Tifaret, when you have the 5 Parsufim after Adam Katmon. And it represents basically the Vav. But when the name is expanded on Ma, what you're gonna have is basically that the letters A and Vav are filled with the letters Aleph. So you're gonna have Yod, Ha, Vav, Ha. Okay, so that's why it is. So when he said leaders of 100, Sarei Ma'ot, correspond to the letter Kuf. Why? Because the letter Kuf, it's the letter that the value is 100, and it's also the letter, or the first letter of the word or the name Cain. Then when he says Sarei Hamishin, leaders of 50, correspond to the letter Nun. Letter Nun is also a letter that is in the name of Cain. Is the last letter in the name Cain. Then when he say Sarei Aseret, the leaders of 10, this corresponds to the letter Yod, and the letter Yod is the letter Yod in the name Cain. So basically, by doing this appointing of judges, what Moshe was doing was correcting that side in the Bnei Israel, the side that belonged or was of the level of Cain. And we know in previous Parsha we mentioned, that there were some people that were from that level, like when we have the rebellion of one of the Levites against Moshe, it was because instead of rectifying this level of Cain in himself, he let that energy, that force, overtake him, and so he wanted to basically do the same thing that Cain did to Hevel, rise over Moshe. So that's something that it is important that he's telling us in this part, that it is important to remember that the judges are there basically to keep a balance and to basically correct that side that we call Cain. Another thing that we need to talk, if you go to verse, the first chapter, verse 22 to 23, it says, all of you approached me and said, let us send men ahead of us, and they shall spy out the land for us and bring word back to us and tell us the road on which we should ascend and the cities to which we should come. The idea was good in my eyes, so I took from you 12 men, 1 man for each tribe. So the word meraglim, spies, is used, and basically it's describing someone that enters the land, any land, and spies how this land is about what kind of government, what things we have there. In this case, they were exploring the land in order to know how to enter the land, what kind of people were there, what kind of people they were gonna find. Symbolically, for the Kabbalists, it meant that these spies were supposed to go there and see what forces of Tumah needed to be corrected, or in order to for the land of Canaan become the land of Israel. And if you know, the land of Israel is basically feminine, and it represents the Shekhinah. Okay. So one thing that we need to understand with this is that Moshe's soul is from the spiritual realm known as Abba, Father, which is a Sephirah Chokmah. And what he wanted to do was to rectify Parsuf Rachel, Rachel. And what is the Parsuf Rachel? Parsuf Rachel is the Parsuf that represents the Sephirah Malchut. Okay? So Rachel, even though it is represented by Malchut, is rooted in the spiritual light of the Sephirah Bina. And when we study Kabbalah, we're going to see that Bina, Malchut, this interaction between desire to receive, desire to bestow, and how this desire to receive wants to become a desire to bestow. Right? And this Sephirah Bina is called Ima. Okay? Moshe wanted to rectify Rachel and unite them with the Sephirot that are in Serampin. And Serampin has Chesed, Geburah, Tiferet, Esachod, and Yesod. And these are basically 6 Sephirot, right, inside Serampin. And the soul of all the spies, according to Rabbi Yaakov Haser, I'm going to read a little bit about what he says here. The soul of all the spies came from the spiritual light of the Sephirah of Abba, which is Chokmah. And when they enter the realm of Rachel, which is Malchut, they are spies, for it is not their land. And we have, as we have said, for they are from the generation of the wilderness, and not from Rachel, Malchut, which is called the land of Canaan. Moshe was able to send the spies since his soul is from the Sephirah of Yesod, within the Sephirah of Abba, located in the middle of the Sephirah of Yesod, in the Sephirah Mother, or Ima, which means the spiritual light of Ima surrounded him from all sides. The spiritual lights of Ima were given to Rachel and Leah, which are considered the back portions of the spiritual works, and the Sephirah of Yesod of Ima surrounds the Sephirah of Yesod within the Sephirah of Abba from all sides. If so, when the spiritual lights of Yesod of Abba shine forth and become a generation of the wilderness, which faces the Sephirot of Serampin, then they must take some sparks of holiness from Yesod of Ima along with them as they pass through. The spiritual light of Yesod of Abba mixes together with the light from Yesod of Ima, and they shine forth to the generation of the wilderness. Therefore, there were a number of people in the generation of the wilderness whose souls were from Yesod of Abba, that had become mixed with Yesod of Ima, and shined forth to Rachel, Malchut, as the light from Mother, Ima, which are within Yesod, want to shine forth to Rachel. Yet Yesod of Abba stands between them. Therefore the lights pass through Yesod of Abba in order to reach Rachel, or Rachel. As they do so, they take some of the sparks of holiness from Yesod of Abba along with them to the other side. So these are very deep concepts, right? When we talk, about how these, basically what it's saying is that how this light was supposed to reach Rachel, Malchut, And to make it, simple, it's basically that Moshe and this generation that were rooted in the Sephirah Chokmah, they thought at that moment that they could rectify the Sephirah Malchut, which is called the land. Malchut, Rechel, Shekhinah, we're gonna see that, and they are basically the same level of land, Eretz. And it was because at that time the sparks of holiness from Abba were mixed with the sparkles of holiness of Ima, especially from the Yesod part of Abba with the Yesod of Ima, the Sephirah Bina. And these, because they were mixed, they traveled towards Rachel. And this concept, to explain it more simple, is in order for the light of the Creator to reach the lower levels, it needs to be surrounded by Or Hasidim. So it has, in order for the Abba to give to the lower Ima, it has to be through Ima. It has to be surrounded by the light of Ima, and Ima then can give it to the lower ones. In this case, Serampin, the lower 6. So then Serampin can pass it, to the lower one, which is his Nukba, Mahut. All right. So because of that, because of some people in the wilderness were rooted on Chokmah, they thought that they could actually do this rectification because of the connection, right? And that's the reason they asked for these spies to be sent, and Moshe agrees with them and send the spies. And then at the end, we know what happened. The spies basically didn't work out, and that's when we have the ninth of Av, Tisha B'Av, and all the calamities that happened simply because of a breaking, a disconnection that happened at that time. So the light of our souls is from Yesod of Abba, but we know that Rachel needs to be rectified through the light of Yesod of Ima. Despite this, we can succeed because Yesod of Ima surrounds and encompasses Yesod of Father. So like I said, or Chokmah, the light of Chokmah needs to be surrounded by the light of Bina or Hasidim, and then it can travel down to the lower Sephirot. Okay. Therefore, some of the light from Father or Abba will have light from Ima mixed with it and travel towards Malchut, towards the lower one, right? And it must be that some of our soul contains a mixture of this light. Through these people, we will be able to rectify Malchut. That's basically the message of Moshe when he said, "All of you approach me and say, let us send men ahead of us." The word lifanenu, which is ahead of us, seems, according to Rabbi Yaakov Kasser, it seems unnecessary. But we need to understand that it's based on what we have said already about Yesod of Ima surrounding Yesod of Abba. And when they combine, they come down, down to the Nukba. And then, and bring word back to us. We basically, the word Davar represents Rachel, the Nukba, right? So when Moshe saw that their reasoning was correct, he admitted that their words were accurate and said to them, "The idea was good in my eyes." As we mentioned, Moshe's entire goal was to rectify Rachel, the Nukba, representing the word Ha-Davar. The idea literally actually means, the word. It was good in his eyes to rectify Rachel. And that's basically what this Parsha is talking about when Moshe mentions, all these places and all that kind of stuff. He's talking about what was the mission of Israel, was to rectify these kings that die, and be aware of these forces, be aware of the speech, the better, in this case, the word Bemidbar in it has the word, Dibur, and it's basically saying, guard your speech, because it was also because of the speech that the 10 spies failed, because they brought back, basically bad bad news from the land. Instead of bringing, this good land and everything, they were like, there's no way we can get that land, there's no way we can achieve that, there's no way we can do what it is asked from us. And therefore they create, a calamity within the Israel, because of that kind of speech. Okay, so that's what the Parsha actually is telling us in the beginning. It's an introduction basically to what Moshe was trying to get through the children of Israel had, about their mission as a people, and the reason they were in the desert for 40 years, the reason they were, and the reasons why they were, suffering certain things for certain mistakes that they made in the past, and how to rectify, how to bring back these sparks that basically fell down into the lower realms by they, after Moshe's death, fighting and knowing that God was going to be with them and was going to fight for them. And what is basically telling us as well, and this is something that I'm going to finish with this, is that in the beginning it says Elohim created the heavens and the earth, right? And when we see the word of Elohim, we see the word of Elohim like it is in plural. And the reason it is in plural because it implies forces of the Creator. And these forces are basically Elohim. They work together in order to create what we know as creation. And in this case, what we have is Elohim talking or saying something, and let there be light, and there was light, And for Israel, there's a secret in speech as well, and that secret is the following: that Israel, or those people that belong to Israel, they have also that power, and therefore they are a force in creation as well. They are a force of correction, and whatever was broken in the past, now they can mend it. How? By staying together, by loving each other, by fighting together against the forces of Tuma. And that's how they become a force in creation, a force of correction inside creation. So we have that power basically of becoming a force in creation. We have used it the wrong way. We have become a power that actually destroys nature because we want to use it for egoistic desires. It destroys relationships because we use our speech, the force of our speech, which creates angels and demons for our own selfish desires. And we're paying the price. And as we are now in the process of going through a pandemic, and we need to understand that there is a reason for it. There's a root for this cause, and it's evil speech. And everybody has to do, from the media, from the media to the politicians, and to people living in their households and everything. Evil speech has taken us to this point, and that's what we need to guard ourselves from. If there's something we need to learn from the previous Parsha and this Parsha, is that evil speech is what brings calamity. It brings plagues, and it brings, what is called diseases of the skin, which is something that is temporary, but it's basically telling you you're impure. You're impure to be together with the congregation of Israel, to be part of Israel, because of the evil speech. So that's something we need to pay attention to, and look at ourselves. What are we doing with our speech? Because we are forces in nature. We have become a big force together in nature, but for a negative thing instead of a positive thing. Okay? So I'll leave you with that thought. I'll see you on the next Parsha lesson. And if you are seeing me before Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. And I hope you visit www.receivingtheupperlight.com, and there you can see the previous Parsha, also the channel on YouTube. If you subscribe, you'll be receiving alerts whenever there's a new video, and so you can see and continue studying the Parsha according to the Kabbalah and according to the insights given by Rabbi Yaakov Abu Haseira, the Avir Yaakov. Okay, we'll see you next time.